Last of Us, right? Universal praise. 97% from critics, 96% audience score, making it one of the best TV shows of all time. Not even close to some of the like classics that like score lower than this. Super intrigued because often as well, if critics really like something these days, that's because, they know the people that are making it or they're politically aligned or whatever, and it gets a little bump. And the audience generally think it's garbage. And if an audience likes something like The Orville is a great example of that, because The Orville is better Star Trek than anything CBS has made. The critics have to hate it because they want to push the corporate product. But this is universal praise across the board for this from fans and from critics alike. And so, listen, as I said the other night, I have played The Last of Us many, many times. Love that game. Not for the game itself, because, the gameplay, it's aight, but it's the story it tells. And I like a game that takes me on a journey and tells me a story. And I think Last of Us is probably Naughty Dog's, like, opus work. It is the type of story you don't very often get in a video game. The immediate comparison would be to something like Telltale's initial blast of The Walking Dead, and that was a very emotional story that had very similar beats. And so, if you tell me a good story, I'll come along for it. I don't even care if the gameplay is kind of a little bit whack or tedious. If you suck me into the story, I'm in with the game, and I don't care how you tell me the story. Do it directly, do it environmentally, do it a mix of all of the above. If you make me feel something in a video game, you're getting a good review from me. So I thought probably in terms of the games down the years that have actually made me feel something, like actually moved me to tears, there's like a handful of them, and The Last of Us is absolutely, unbelievably one of those. And why is that? It's because it's a story that's profound and common in and of itself. You don't need to be an American, don't need to have kids to relate to it. What The Last of Us is about, and it's almost alluded to a little bit in the title with the writing, The Last of Us is about the ties that bind you to everybody else in your life and what's important. And it's about loss, which I'll talk a little bit about in a second. It's about love. It's about caring for someone. It's about being willing to be vulnerable to protect those you care about, but also to just even have that relationship in the first place. And so this is like incredibly like adult material for a medium that isn't considered particularly adult. So when they announced they were going to make the TV adaptation of it, I was like, okay, a little bit of trepidation, because game adaptations notoriously suck balls. And they suck balls because the mediums are so fundamentally different that even a strong cinematic game, a game that borrows TV and movie tropes, even down to the camera angles and the pacing and the cutscenes, generally when it goes back the other way, it's impossible to get it right, because you feel something different when you're interacting with something. And this is crucial. When you play a game and you're interacting with it, you either are the protagonist, or you make a choice for the protagonist, or you spend time with the other characters in the game in a way that you don't when you just passively watch a TV show. So I thought, first of all, it's going to suffer from that. And then second of all, I did have some worries about the casting. Initially, notably, I mean, it's not, obviously it's the elephant in the room. I was worried about the Ellie casting. I don't know why, but as the story is about her, essentially. I mean, yeah, it's about Joel, but really it's about her as well, and that becomes more apparent with the direction they chose for the sequel. I gotta say, I didn't know if, Bella Ramsey was going to be able to sell me on it. And that was predicated on the writing in Game of Thrones, where her character was like the little girl boss, a room full of giant men, all with like scars across their face, going, I don't know if I can fight for you, King in the North. And then this little girl pipes up and goes, I've been fighting the White Walkers for only 8 years, but I know how to respect my oaths, unlike some men in this room. And everybody fucking clapped. And I'm like, oh my God, like, no, they've cast her because they think Ellie's a girl boss too. And and that's not who she is as a character. And they're going to use that energy from Game of Thrones in this. And I was like, nah, I can't. It was nothing to do with the way she looked. She has an unconventional look. She doesn't look like Ellie in the video games. It was nothing about that. She's meant to be a teenage girl. Like, how she appears is irrelevant. And, like, it's a little bit fucking creepy, some of the feedback I've seen. No, she's not as pretty as Ellie in the game. Like, yeah, all right. You're on fucking nonce watch, you fucking weirdo. But at the end of the day, like, she's been great. Just to get this out the way, I think she's done a great job. I think it's been, she is understood the nature of the character fine. She's not the problem at all with the show, and the show does have some problems, which we're going to get to. Pedro Pascal. Has Pedro Pascal ever made anything bad that he's been involved in? This guy's an absolute top fucking G. One of my favourite emergent actors. Really just stood out for me in Narcos. I thought he was great there. But obviously prior to that, Oberyn Martell is like, out of all the characters that could be in the Game of Thrones universe, like, I'm Oberyn tomorrow. Like, no, but don't you want to be type? No. Don't you want to? No, Oberyn. Every fucking time. They're just bisexual dueling legend. Like, who just, you know, like, he is the fucking absolute boy. And do you know what? Nailed it. Obviously read the books. You know, it's perfect. Pedro, he just owned that role and made it so memorable. You know, even in the, you know, he was still part of it, even as the seasons were declining in quality, obviously. Not before it hit critical mass. But he was just a standout. He was a standout in a great cast for me. So I was like really up. I thought Joel, you know, I saw a lot of people talking about, you know, oh, it's not whitewashing. Listen, if anything, they haven't given him enough to do yet. Like, this is the thing that I've been a little bit shocked by, is that he probably hasn't even said 50 lines in the first 2 episodes. It's so crazy how little they've used this great actor. And as I said, got such a great range. I don't like Star Wars, but all my friends have told me he's like mega in the Mandalorian. I don't really care about that. In general, I think, you know, great piece of casting. He looks the part. He's got a bit more heavy set, a bit thicker than you would normally associate him with. And he's got the demeanor down. And yeah, the cast isn't the issue as far as I can tell. Now, this is recorded before episode 3, when Nick Offerman is playing the character who's the booby trap guy in the town. And that's going to be airing, that's airing tonight. That episode is crucial. If they fuck that up, I'll have worse things to say. Because that part of the game is so important with all of its, like, foreshadowing and messaging. And the guy who played the role in the game is the guy who plays it's Dan, right, from Deadwood. And he is a great character actor. Nick Offerman's got some big shoes to fill for the game. So anyway. So let's start with a bit more of a coherent review. As I said, I made a ton of notes, like, last night. I wanted to get it kind of, you know, cohesive. So I sat down, I watched the first 2 episodes. Let's just start with the problems this has. The opening scene of the first episode is a group of scientists sat on a late night, like late 60s, early 70s talk show. Can't remember the exact date. And they are talking about, oh, well, pandemics, yes, viruses are bad, but really, compared to fungi, they ain't shit. And if a cordyceps fungus, for example, ever could take over humans, we'd be in real trouble, you know, because there's no stopping them. And everyone in the audience is like deathly quiet, and then it cuts to the titles. Now, that episode is what I call a stupid American scene. You are creating a show for dumb Americans that just need to have everything spoon-fed to them. That scene shouldn't exist or should be excised for European viewing, because I don't need to be told the thing that's about to happen is about to happen and the thing is going to be bad when it happens, right? So that's garbage. That takes me right out of it. Oh, yes, what if cordyceps were to take over your brain? Oh, look, here's a fucking series all about cordyceps taking over your brain. I don't need to be spoon-fed that. And the same goes for episode 2, where they had these introduction scenes of a top, I don't know what they're called fungologists, I don't even know, which is an expert in funguses and disease, in Jakarta, right? And she gets took to the headquarters and they look at her body and it's laid out, it's brutal, it's graphic, you know, there's like, it's a full naked female body. And they didn't shy away from that, which is important for the world building. I get it. But this scene, again, just shouldn't exist. Mycologist, thanks, chat. I don't need to know what happened in Jakarta. I don't care. I don't care. It's not relevant to the journey you want to take me on, which is about the Joel and Ellie relationship in this world. That is central to the story. Anything peripheral to that has to be developing that story. And this doesn't. And this is like, are you making a touching story about two people who, one, an incredibly broken man, traumatized because of the loss of his daughter, two, a precocious teenage girl who has an outward veneer of being self-capable because she's actually afraid, and these two people learning to trust each other and break down their barriers to the point where they love one another. That is the story. It's not The Walking Dead. I don't care about what the nasty disease does. I don't care if Jakarta got bombed off the face of the earth in this universe. It's not relevant to this tiny little intimate story you're going to tell me. And so that shit opening scene in episode 1 and the shit opening scene in episode 2, those have to go for the story. They're just garbage. Like, I don't need them in the story. What the opening scene should have been pre-credits was the kid dying. So in episode 1, they channel a little bit of Schindler's List, which is there's a kid and he's been out there in the Boston wastelands, right? And the kid's alive somehow, inexplicably. This is years later. Makes it to the little township where they're all rebuilding. Gets in, and a woman is talking to him from the government, whatever they're called, FERMA or whatever they're called in the game. She's talking to the kid and saying it's going to be okay, everything's going to be comfortable. And the guy behind, Fedra, thanks. The guy behind is doing a test and it comes up red. And this is an important scene because it shows you red bad, right, which you need to know for the testing. You could have figured it out, but remember, we're spoon feeding Americans, so red bad, and this is how we do the tests, an ear test, red bad. And also just how brutal the world is. That this little kid that you're kind of optimistic about, the next scene, and you know by the shoes on his feet, which is like reminiscent of the Schindler's List with the red coat. He's in a truck full of dead bodies and he gets thrown onto a funeral pyre by Joel. Just so you know, Joel just picks it up because he doesn't give a fuck and launches the body on the fire. That's the pre-credits scene. That immediately tells me this world is terrible. No one is safe. Joel is a monster now and unmoved by anything horrible. And then we go back in time to when Joel had his kid and we do the opening scene from the game. That would have been better for me. I'll also say loads of people were raving about the recreation, almost scene for scene, of the opening scene where in the game you play as Joel's daughter and she dies. She gets shot by one of the soldiers who's told to not let them out the quarantine zone. And obviously that scene, if you knew nothing about the game going in back in the day, that scene just, shit. That is a truly shocking moment in just video games. And it serves the same purpose I'm saying the other scene would have served. You're playing as the kid, so it's especially jarring because it's like, when you remember what I said, when you play a game, you're the protagonist. The voice actor in the game, I thought nailed it more than the scene when he was holding her body than the TV series. I thought what kind of maybe got miscommunicated when they were directing the scene was like, Joel, you know, you're essentially a pussy now. Like, you're a normal human being. Like, at this stage, you're gonna blub and howl and wail and go through everything you go through when you lose a child. But it was very flat for me. And I just think, unfortunately, and this again ties into interactivity over passive consumption. I cried when I played the game and felt nothing when I watched the show. Like, I felt less by comparison. The game moved me more than the TV show. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because I knew what was coming. That's entirely possible. But, you know, actors, you would have thought humans doing it instead of pixels. I would have felt more, but I didn't. I didn't feel the same as the game. I know now, if I go and watch one of them YouTube videos where it's all the game played through, like just the cutscenes and minimal gameplay so it makes sense, I'll cry at that again. I will, 100%. I know it'll move me. I don't know when or where, but it will make me blub. So far, the TV series don't make me feel like that at all. Right? In any of the episodes, I haven't been emotional once watching this, and that makes me a little bit worried. I also want to talk a little bit about characterization. Joel, post the fall, is perfect. He's just not used enough. Very clearly, the writers' room have decided they don't want to make it a sort of gruff white dude story and explore other people. He's had very few lines, you know, like, overall, and it's just a bit weird. Like I say, the game throws you because for the first half you think it's his story, and then for the second half you kind of realize it's Ellie's, and then the ending obviously on a cliffhanger, and essentially a betrayal of the trust you've worked so hard to build up. Yeah, this is what makes it amazing. This is why it's like a great storytelling journey. So they've got to use Joel like way more. Joel is a lot more active in the game in the first half, and it just, I don't know, compared to the TV series, he's had very little to do or say. On top of that, Tess, they rewrote a bunch of scenes for the Tess storyline, and I just don't like it at all. They've done Tess very dirty in these first 2 episodes. Tess was an absolute badass in the game. Tess was female Joel. Joel managed to find, and even though they had a very dispassionate, loving relationship, Joel managed to find his female equivalent in the apocalypse and kind of like begrudgingly pair up with her. Tess was like, she was a stone cold fucking killer. Tess kills that dude who jacks their guns. She's all about that shit, by the way. She takes a beating and tells Joel not to worry about it when they're like sharing a bourbon together, and it's the one vector for any affection he shows because he's big, you know, big bad protector man, because obviously he failed to protect his kid, and that's like an open wound in his psyche for him. That's a key component of his personality. But man, in the TV show, Tess ends up being like, you know, the villain, the criminal who stole a car battery now, not guns, because they're not gun runners, which is like, I don't know, like, but he says, please don't set Joel on me. He's not worried about her at all. That's not very empowering as a fundamental change to her character. And then, I gotta say, the way that they kill her off, it was way better in the game. She gets bit. It's probably a bit, like, cliche, but she sacrifices herself and buys them some time, you know, so they can get away and get on the move. And, you know, it's like she's fighting off people who are hunting them down, as opposed to the infected, which is what they rewrote it to in this. And it's a powerful scene in the game. You know, you become attached to Tess. You spend like the first however many hours in the game running around doing this thing with Tess. Tess ain't going to be with you, leaving you alone with Ellie. You know, Joel's worst fear, and you kind of feel that. So, you know, these are creative decisions. I understand. There's one thing that made sense. I read an interview where they said they didn't want her to be fighting off Fedra, because if Fedra are out there in the wastelands, like, how dangerous can the wastelands be? So I get that. But what they absolutely didn't have to do was kill her off with that weird thing, because they made this creative choice to not have the spores. And this is obviously because, one, it does create some sort of plot holes, which you even in the game sort of acknowledge. Two, it creates loads of situations where the actors would have to wear gas masks, which I really thought they were going to go with that, because it's produced by the dudes who made the fucking Chernobyl TV series, which is fucking great. Right, but anyway, they didn't want to do that, and so they made it, so it's these fucking tendrils, and the tendrils have to get into you. As she's setting up to, like, burn all of the, infected zombies away, she has eye contact with one of them, and it lumbers over to her, and then it gives her, like, a French kiss, but instead of using its tongue, it uses its tendrils, and obviously she gets zombified and she drops a lighter and it sets everyone on fire. Now, that is, to me, like, okay, so look, I'm a media student, I'm a twat. I get it, right? I think what they were trying to do was, like, create this, like, inversion of the intimacy she craved from Joel. They stayed true to the lines. She's like, there's got to be enough between us that you'll do this for me and take her, to the Fireflies. All of that stayed in. And obviously, Joel is incapable of intimacy because of the trauma he's gone through and the sustained trauma, not just losing a daughter, but all the terrible things he did to sort of stay alive in the apocalypse. Like, he's a stone cold killer, a remorseless killer. And obviously these things are going to mount up on you. So he's incapable of intimacy. So I get that, though, the zombie kissing her is like an inversion of the intimacy she wants to have on some level with Joel, but can never have. So I get that, right? But also it's like there's a rapey implication whenever you have a female character die by being violated. And again, it comes down to a lack of empowerment from of a female character who was a really strong female character in the game. And I don't know how a writer's room that's meant to be sensitive to these issues doesn't pick up on how kind of, like, unpalatable that is. Nah, it wasn't for me. That's the worst scene. More than the opening scenes, that's the worst scene in the 2 episodes I've seen so far. There were also a couple of things that I noticed that don't make sense. There's a scene where they're talking to Ellie and she has to prove that her bite isn't going to make her turn. They say something like, one sound out of you and, we won't hesitate. And she does an impersonation of a clicker. She starts doing that, right? And then Tess goes, don't. Because in other words, Joel won't hesitate, he will kill you. Then later on, when they go to the museum, it's clear from her reaction she's never seen a clicker. So how did she know to do an impersonation of a clicker? She even said in the scene before the impersonation of the clicker, is it true that some get so big and they communicate by clicking? Because I've heard that rumor. So she hasn't seen one. She hasn't encountered one. Then she does an impersonation of one, a spot-on impersonation, even with the creepy hands. And then she acts surprised when she sees one in person in the museum. So these are like little things you miss when you want to throw in a little bit of, like, levity, get a bit of humor in there, try and give the character a bit more to do. Because that was, like, by itself, that's a funny scene that shows she's got a fearless attitude and will joke around even in the direst of circumstances, which is in keeping with the character. But it's sloppy writing. I picked up on that and it did take me out of it a little bit, So anyway, that's the bad. And I think it's bad enough to say, people saying this is flawless, the best show of 2023, one of the best TV shows of all time, you're jumping the gun just a little bit. But now I can talk about the good things and the things that I like, and there was lots there. The first thing right out the gate, keeping the game's score. Thank God they did that. The score is so beautiful, and it is such an important part of the game and the atmosphere and the world building. The minute I heard that Spanish-style twangy guitars start up again on the, spores spreading, the fungus spreading title sequence, I was like, okay, they at least get this. They get this, The music is mega. I fucking listen to that. Like, that soundtrack is so good. And I'm just glad they, like, recreated it with, like, even more production and polish, but kept it simple as well. Didn't feel the need to go over the top. It's just ideal. So they recognized the value of that, So very, very happy about that. And it's been there throughout the episodes. It's not just the title sequence. It's there in the emotional stings. You know, they come back when they're walking across the desolate landscape. It's perfect. It's exactly what you would experience if, you know, in the game. I'll also say as well, the locations that they've created, they're meticulous. They look like, you know, if there's an overgrown apocalypse, they look great. The disused buildings with the stinky water, the right level of decomposition on the corpses, the way they didn't shy out of the more difficult, having the two big skyscrapers like having fallen onto each other, the craters from the bombings. They did a great job with that. Like it's absolutely spot on. I might say, as a mega criticism, a little bit too brightly lit. It could have done with just being a little bit darker, but this is a prestige TV show, and they want to put all of that on there. You know, they want you to see what they've done. The museum was just, and the hotel lobby and the museum scenes were perfect. A perfect recreation of the world. You couldn't ask for better than that. And also with it comes the infected, the monsters, the zombies, the clickers. Brilliant. Like, did a really good job with that. I wondered, are the clickers going to look a bit ropey because you've got to do this weird bubble thing with the fungus on the head obscuring the eyes, which is why, they have to communicate like bats, click, 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 and to find where people are using like sonar. And that means there's got to be an actor in a costume like that. And is it just going to look like some dickhead with a balloon on his head and it's going to look shit? I had a lot of worries about that too, because the first time you see an actual clicker, it's fucking terrifying. It's gross. You're like, oh fuck. No, they nailed that too. The makeup's been great, set design great, location shooting great, score great. I mean, like in terms of creating a backdrop where the actors just have to go and do their thing, they've done a fantastic job so far. You can't criticize them. So then there was one of the bit I hated. I should have left this in the criticisms. Another, you're an American dickhead who needs to be spoon-fed scene. Nearly forgot about this. It's on my notes there. I just put it out of order. So when Joel beats the Fedra guy to death, the one who was pissing against the wall and is pointing a gun at him, there is no need at all to show me a flashback to when his daughter died and the soldier pointing the gun at him. Dude, it was like 30 minutes ago. I saw it. I know enough about how this might be very traumatic for him. He's there with a young girl as a soldier with an assault rifle pointed at him in the dark, having just done an infected test. Like, yes, I don't need the flashback. It's okay. It's okay. Like, that pissed me off because, again, that took me out of it. Like, it's like I identify so much with all of these characters and their motivations in the video game. There's no flashback there. You fucking know. Like, why Joel is going to be triggered as a motherfucker off this shit. So, yeah, they didn't need to do that. But anyway, what I'll say is they didn't skimp on making Joel the character he needs to be to sell this story. I just wish there was more of him and he'd been used a bit more, but they kept the watch motif in. Brilliant addition to the story was his daughter going to get the watch repaired, specifically the guy doing it last minute as the world falls down. Then you get the scene, drugs, they sell hardcore drugs, they pass over the watch that's broken at the exact same moment he himself was broken, forever frozen in the time of his trauma. I'm so glad they left that motif in. It's like a bit heavy-handed to do things like that with watches and clocks, because if you know your literature, it's not just Watchmen, the comic that obviously did that with Dr. Manhattan, the watchmaker's son. But if you go back to William Faulkner's Sound in the Fury, there's lots of motifs around the clock and the passage of time and how all these different people are unified by this like watch that gets passed on after a character dies and stuff. So I'm glad they left it in. It would have been an easy decision to take that out as being cliche, but I always think it's too perfect. It's too perfect when she says, your watch is broken. He's it's just too good. You have to have that in there. And they left it in there, and they did it, and it's perfect. I think Ellie overall, the way that they've made her this like slightly annoying, wisecracking, precocious teenager. So far, they've hit the exact perfect tone for her. And I just hope it continues. I don't need a moment where she saves Joel being written in a way that doesn't happen organically in the game, because yes, she does do that, right? But it comes over time, and that trust has to be there. I don't need it written in too quick. I want it to build. I want their relationship to grow organically, and I want her to be annoying and find her annoying in the same way Joel finds her annoying, until you learn to get her idiosyncrasies. That's super important to selling the character. Super important. And listen, they've nailed it. Nailed it in the delivery. Nailed it in the script, with the exception of the clicker thing. It's perfect. And so far, they are really poised to nail what the game does so well with its writing. And that is that, right, it's a game. It's about loss and about the ties that bind us. And this is cyclically repeated to you, that this, you know, when things are bad, we lose people that we love and care about. And we can choose to cut ourselves off, or we can choose to remain human and engage with other people. There will be other people. There are other people that need us, other people that love us, other relationships. And loss is an inevitable part of life. And it is just repeated through the game cyclically. Starts, you lose a daughter. Then you lose Tess. You know, like, you can't even have a fucked up, broken relationship in a dystopia, because the world is so cruel, it won't allow you to have it. And who doesn't feel that, you know? And then, right, now I'm stuck with this girl that I don't want to relate to, don't know, and she's needy and annoying. And then you go to Booby Trap Town, and you meet Bill. And what's Bill going through? You don't realize it at first. Bill is a homosexual, still closeted, even in the apocalypse, so shut off from the rest of the world. His entire town he's created for himself is essentially a manifestation of that closed insularness. But then you realize he's got a partner, and not just a partner, but a partner, an actual partner. And they've had an argument, a lover's tiff. And the partner wants to get out of this little closeted booby trap town they've made for themselves. The perfect fucking analogy, by the way, for the gay experience in macho America. And he gets bit, and he dies, and they find his body. And because Joel and Ellie don't know the significance, Bill's got a fucking proper masculine, dare I say, stonewall it, and laugh about his stupid Hawaiian shirt and the stupid argument they had, and how he was a piece of shit for stealing the things for the car. You know, we know what's gone on. Yeah, there's a little bit at the end where Ellie makes a joke about the porno magazines being stuck together. She finds a stash of gay porn, essentially. But we know, and it's a repetition. You don't get to have anything in this world, and this world is our world. You lose people you care about, and you know, you can be a brave face, insular, like Joel, right? And Bill. Bill is a mirror image of what Joel essentially would be if it wasn't for the development of Ellie in his life. So it's important. And then you get to the next scene, right? And that is where you get the two brothers. And obviously, the younger brother gets bit. They don't realize. They have to put him down. Looks like the older brother's going to murk Joel and Ellie, and instead turns the gun on himself, blows his brains out. And so again, we're presented with this cyclical theme of losing the people we care about, an inability to protect those we love against the worst circumstances, against a cruel, unforgiving universe. And Joel could have been that guy. Joel could have murked himself, probably thought about it a million times, but didn't. And so the reason you see these things, and it goes right the way through, and the game ends with what the whole thing for me is really about. Because it's not just relationships as a whole. This is essentially a focus on parenthood that we take on ourselves, surrogate parents, the actual parenthood, but also, the family unit, essentially. All of the relationships at various points that you come across. It's about, mothers, fathers, kids. That's the whole thing. And so the way the game ends is so important to all of that stuff that goes before, because when Joel refuses to let Ellie be killed by a bunch of incompetent Firefly doctors, that spoiler, if you read all the notes and all that, they butchered a bunch of other people. There were others like Ellie and they fucked it up, but they're totally sure they've got it right this time. As I've said many times, if I was Joel, I'd massacre them all. I've said it, and I wouldn't lose a day's sleep. You take my kid, you're getting it. Like, the end. Like, so, I always thought, like, this, like, sort of this reimagining of the storyline, this like reconstruction of it being, no, but Ellie would have saved the whole world. There was no guarantee that was going to happen. You have to understand that. That's canonically accurate. And Joel made a choice to essentially, do I roll the dice with someone who's now my kid? No, fuck no. Fuck no, I don't. And that, funnily enough, people say that's the ultimate extension of his inhumanity. That's him coming back to being human. Because that's what we do. We are selfish and we care about people. And when we care about people, there's no sin we won't commit to save them. We'll damn ourselves to save the people we love. That's love. That's it in a nutshell. So people who say that don't understand what the game is, for me, what the game is saying, which is upsetting because Druckmann has sort of lent into that as time has gone on. But what the game says to me is that, you know, to be human is sometimes to be cold and inhuman to strangers. It's not to necessarily exude empathy for people you don't know. It's to do anything at all for the people in our circle, the ties that bind us. That's why it's a really profound story. And the beauty of it is they nail the ending, because the ending tells us what any parent knows, and that is parenthood is based on a lie. The lie at the end, you know, which I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about, but to be explicit, the lie at the end of The Last of Us is that she said, like, oh, you know, what happened, you know, and he said, oh, they couldn't use you, they couldn't take the thing out your brain and fix you, so they just gave you back. They were wrong. They let it sit for a bit, and then the end, they're just having a nice walk in the woods, fatherly daughter walk, and she asks him, like, tell me the truth, you know, like, is that real? And he lies to her and he says yes. And she knows he's lying. And the game ends. And it's their relationship is forever soured because it was built on trust. And it is a betrayal of that trust. They've always been honest with each other up until this point. But parenthood is like that. Parenthood is based on a lie. And the lie is this. You say to your kids, nothing bad will ever happen to you. Nothing. Kids, when they first become aware of death, typically when they lose a grandparent or maybe a pet, and they say, does everyone die? And you go, well, yeah, but like not for ages, not forever, and you're not going to die. You don't know that. You can't guarantee it. You can't watch them 24/7. Think of hospital waiting rooms filled with bereaved, you know, soon-to-be bereaved parents and doctors coming out, weary demeanor, having to give the worst news you can give to another adult. But that's parenthood. We tell the lie to our kids because it's not enough that they're at risk. We just don't want them to be horrified the entire time with their own existence. And so that's the lie. And so, of course, Joel, now a really, you know, a newly re-established parent, has to tell a lie to the kid that he loves, and it's one that's ultimately destructive within the terms of the relationship. So, listen, I think they're going to nail all of these motifs because they've left in key scenes untouched. And even though they maybe didn't make me feel as much as the game, it's crucial those scenes are in if they're going to get to that emotional core. Like, I might still blub on the last episode. Like, don't think I won't. The big scene for me in the game, and I always remember this, it's when they first learned to build their relationship with each other. And it's when I think they're being shot at by someone, and they're on that bridge. It's just before they've already met the brothers, but they get caught out, and anyway they have to jump in the water, and Ellie can't swim, and that's actually written into the game in the game mechanics as well. But she says, "I'm going to jump in," and Joel goes, "No, you can't swim," and she just says, "You'll keep me afloat," and she throws herself in, and that is like the idolization of children to their parents, where you can do no wrong. And what a profound feeling it must have been for a parent who believes he's failed and has that fear of failing to be told that again. and then to be presented with this opportunity for redemption. It's like, it's a powerful, powerful scene. And I'm utterly confident in the way that they've done the first 2 episodes. They are going to continue to leave the big emotionally resonant moments in from the game relatively untouched. And that was a big fear going in. So I'll just add the criticism I've seen a lot of, and I can understand it, is that they haven't taken enough creative risks. Like, why would I watch the show if I can just play the game? And that's a valid question, because so far, as I said, the game is a much more impactful experience for me. But also, I think this is the impossible line to walk, because this is like one of those like marquee games where it's got such a big fan base, a fan base that really feels let down by the sequel, which I've just erased from my mind because it was just terrible writing. But the reality is, if they take too many risks and change it too much, people are going to be hypercritical. If you don't take enough, all the wokesters and journalists and people that wanted this to be about Trump or something, they're going to get super upset as well. But I think so far, they've absolutely walked the line that they have to. And I'm just hoping now the actors can fucking sell it. I'm just hoping the actors can do it justice, do the material justice. And, tonight's episode's going to be a big indicator of that, because I think, first of all, apprehensive about Offerman in the role, but that scene, as I said, is so critical and pivotal to the storyline and the motifs within the storyline. If tonight's episode blows, I'll be very disappointed, and I'll do a follow-up review. But in general, where would I place this? It's not a 97% show by any stretch of the imagination. Where would I place this? This is it's not better than Deadwood. It's not better than The Wire. It's not better than The Sopranos. It's not better than Better Call Saul. But it's an 80%. It's a 7.5 or an 8 out of 10. It's not better than Chernobyl. Chernobyl is a fucking unreal show. One of those it's not better than season 1 of True Detective. Another unreal show. These are the, and listen, should it even be as good as that? I mean, should we even be holding it to that standard? Probably not. Because Chernobyl was it's one of the most significant, one of the most significant tragedies and disasters that's happened in human history, So it should probably you should be able to mine that material for a perfect 10. And they did it perfectly. For me, this is it's a pleasant surprise. I can't even imagine what it must be like if you've not played the game to watch. Which is it. I'd love to talk to someone if that applies to someone. But for me, it's just yep, you've done a very good, solid-looking, solidly acted interpretation of source material that really just sings off the page. It's just great rating. I could give it an 80% as it stands. But this Universal praise is just a bit over the top for me. Bit too much, And I think that's it. I think that's everything to say about it. I want them to get it right. They definitely haven't got it wrong so far. I hope that, there's a proper edited version of it at some point where they take out these silly intro scenes and take out the silly flashback scenes and stuff like that. But, there you go. King Muttley nails it. You think about how terrible The Witcher was. Do you remember how we all pretended The Witcher was all right? Do you remember that? You remember how we all convinced ourselves that The Witcher was actually okay? And it wasn't. It was shit. It was dog shit. And we all knew it was. But we just wanted it to be good because, A, it's fucking baller, because it's The Witcher, and Witcher 3 is the best game ever made. And Henry Cavill's a baller. And then it turned out he was a gamer. You remember they tried to smear him because he was saying, we must stay true to the source material in every game he's ever done. And he plays 40k and he builds his own PC. But he's also an absolute Adonis. He's simply gorgeous. And he's a gamer and he hates women. We all wanted it for him because he nailed the role. He did it perfectly. I don't think he's a great actor. I don't think Henry Cavill's a great actor, because he's not a great actor. But probably the best shit he's done is in The Witcher, So, but anyway, yeah, The Witcher adaptation was garbage. Didn't have the budget. And they wanted to rush and Probably because it was on Netflix, didn't think they'd get the time to like tell a satisfying story, so we're straight into the Wild Hunt and all that bullshit. But yeah. So listen, if you're a lover of the game, if you're a lover of The Last of Us, they've done a very serviceable adaptation for you where you can watch this, and there might be 1 or 2 surprises in it, but I hope not. And if there isn't, listen, this is like they've immortalized a piece of media that would have been still, even as successful as it was as a video game, would have been incredibly niche when you were talking about art. You know, like fast forward another 20 years, and then like I'm trying to explain to someone, you ever play the fucking Last of Us? And like, because it had this really cool story in it, and like that, no one's going to know what you're talking about. Now that it's a TV series, the story, the writing, the characters, they all essentially exist forever. So